one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our next step is approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any suggested changes to the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as was.
Hearing none, the agenda is approved as circulated. And we got to move on to approval of the May 2nd, 2023 minutes. I think we've had several months to consider them. Does anybody have any suggested changes?
I did not see any issues, but in my own defense, it's because, it may be because I was looking at it in really tiny print and on the computer until I got the hard copy tonight. So if I missed punctuation or something like that, I'll make up for it next time.
I thought you were going to let me off the hook, Marty.
I found nothing,
In the small
but it
version?
might be because it was so small.
Okay. And anybody have any suggested changes to the minutes?
No.
All right. Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now we're on to public comment on non-agenda items. All of you folks who are here in the public, if you wanted to address us on something that's not on the agenda tonight, you're welcome to do so.
There's seats available way up here too, for those of you in the far back in the hallway.
Okay, so now we're on to public hearing procedure review, which is part of our agenda, but which I will dispense with this evening on the grounds that these people look like they're well behaved. So now we're on to 7 action items. That's going to be petition 23 ZBA 004 by John and Catherine Bueller. We'll start off with, does anybody on the board have any conflict of interest or ex parte contact that they need to disclose?
I'm just letting y'all know that I spoke to Mrs. Bueller this morning just to say hello, introduce myself so that she wouldn't wonder why somebody is creeping around her property when I did the site inspection. But nothing was said about the substance.
Any other disclosures? Okay, I think we're good with this, but I can't believe you didn't tell her what time the meeting was.
I'm sorry.
And so now we're on to staff presentation. Are you ready to tell us about this
I am.
application?
Yeah, and do I need to, Janice, do I need to push the,
It is the light on. It's bright green.
now it is. Okay, good to go. All right, excellent. Hello, everyone. Hi. My name is MC Moritz, letter M, letter C. I am an engineer with OHM Advisors. And like Karen was saying at the top here, we were brought on a couple months ago to assist in the planning and zoning department on a temporary basis while the township fills that role permanently. So that's who I am. The matter at hand today is regarding a shed. John and Catherine Bueller are at 13270 Redmond Hills Court. It's rural residential. Their parcel is just over an acre, and they would like to build a shed that comes in just under 200 square feet. It's about, I think it's 192 square feet. And there is this strange element in the ordinance that you folks are aware of as well, that essentially says when you've got an accessory building of 200 square feet or less, which we do in this case, on a lot of 1 acre or more, there are some specific rules regarding the location, the setbacks, and the height. The question at hand today is the height. In this very specific case, the ordinance sets a maximum height of 8.5 feet. And the reason that we have this application for a variance today is to build a shed that is higher, or that has a height that's greater than that. There are a few different heights listed in different parts of the application, but essentially under 12 feet. And I suppose would you like any more information? That's sort of the gist of it. And we've got in your packets, there are some attachments that show the exact location, that illustrate the setbacks. There are also images of the shed, including some computer-generated models that show like an actual rendering, if that's easier. And I think that's all of the technical information, but I'm available for questions, and if there's any technical information I can provide, just let me know.
At this point then, it's time for questions for the staff. Does
I do
anybody on the
have a
ZBA
question.
have questions
I
for
do.
staff?
Yeah.
I might be wrong about this, and you may not know the answer to this, but it's my understanding that one of the reasons why they put the height limit on sheds under 200 square feet was so that they could dispense with inspecting such sheds, allowing those sheds to be erected without requiring a site visit from Chelsea Area Construction Agency to do an inspection, make sure it's built properly. Would this, if we were to approve this variance request, would this shed have to be inspected?
By CACA?
Yeah.
I suppose that is a question for their building inspector on whether or not they would need to do that. So I can't speak to whether or
Okay.
not CACA would have to do it or not. But my understanding too is that this is a prefab shed. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I
it
don't
seems
know.
unlikely, but
You don't know, Marty.
No, don't know.
I guess my question is, do we really have a good idea of what the actual proposed height of the shed is as described in the zoning ordinance, which does not measure the shed to the highest point of the roof, but rather measures it to the height of the sidewall plus half of the height of the roof. And again, I think the math I did puts the overall height of this thing as less than 10 feet. I think it's like
Could be.
9.9 feet or something when you do that, if they don't opt for the cupola.
Well, which I
Attachment.
don't think that counts as the
It-
overall anyhow, does it?
Well, I'm going to argue that I think it does, but in any
We
event,
have definitions in here of height.
yeah, but the highest point, I think, is the word that they, anyway. All I'm saying is, for everybody who's thinking about this, I think they're very, very close to complying with this screwy requirement, because understanding why this would be only applicable to lots larger in size than an acre requires mental gymnastics that I can't perform.
and if this were 201 square feet,
Exactly.
according to the zoning ordinance, it could be 25 feet
Yeah.
tall.
Yes.
So, I mean, I realize the HOA has stricter requirements, but, yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yep.
Any other questions for staff?
Yes. Typically, I think the township provides this great big yellow sign that was absent from the applicant's property. It says something like, there's going to be a public hearing on a zoning variance, such and such a date and all. It looks like the little documents that they had comply with what is mentioned in the application, something about you must post 15 days or whatever. But it was different from our typical situation. Do you know, does that yellow thing reside in the township?
I don't.
And did we loan it out to each zoning applicant?
Yeah. I don't know. I know my colleague Adriana, who's I'm sort of the engineering half of the temporary team, and she's the planning half. She handled the notifications and the preparing of this ZBA packet. I don't know if she found that big yellow thing somewhere. I don't know if it's spooked away in the basement somewhere. I'm not sure, but I think
Yeah, if you could maybe provide that feedback, that would be,
It's easier to spot. for
it's
one
easier
thing
to
when
spot
you're
just
driving.
driving by. We have letters from neighbors that are okay with it, but if it was a more complicated situation, people driving by in the neighborhood should see it, it should jump out at them.
Okay.
So if you wouldn't mind maybe following up with her and seeing if somebody can
Sure.
locate that thing, please.
Yeah, and I don't know, I mean, I know Adriana is very detail-oriented, so if it was outlined in the steps to take, I'm sure she would have at least looked for it. Otherwise, I assume it probably wasn't in the procedure, it might not be written down.
We have
so
to have
that-
more than one of those, too,
That might
because
be
we've
it.
had more than
Yeah,
one
we must.
CBA
Yeah.
appeal on a given night, so someplace there are yellow
Somewhere there's a
signs.
closet,
And
okay.
I'm thinking what you
Unless
just,
David took them all with him, just to remember.
maybe they were his. and he-
For the
remember
memories,
job.
yeah.
I'm thinking that what you said, though, was correct, that if it did not explicitly say, hey, there's this big 3x4 yellow sign or whatever, who would
Right.
know?
Yeah,
And Adriana was just going through the steps as listed.
I would think from my time working in the office with her, I'm positive if it was a step, she would have followed it to AT. But I'll make note of both of those things, so to find the yellow signs, and if it's not included in the procedures, to make a note that that's something that's
Good deal.
you.
documented.
Any other questions for staff? That brings us to the point of the hearing when we hear from the petitioner. Would you like to come up to the microphone and tell us what you'd like to do and what sort of approval you think you'd like to have?
It's under here.
There we go.
Oh.
That may not, well, it's working now. Make sure the green light stays on. Yeah, if it shuts off the green light, push the button, we'll get it back again.
Great.
Thank you.
So we were gonna build a shed. Thought it would be pretty easy. I've done a site plan before for a garage, turned it in, and then all of a sudden found out for some reason the maximum height could be 8.5 feet. And I'm thinking, well, if the top's gonna be 8.5 feet, the rafter's gonna come in real low, and I'm gonna hit my head. So we're applying to have one be, I mean, it's, if you go and you buy a pre-made one, they're all taller than 8.5 feet. It's really not practical to do a flat roof in Michigan for a shed in your backyard. And it seemed like we could get we could ask our association to let us build one larger and then make it, seemingly bigger. But we really didn't want to have a giant shed in our backyard or something that was super tall, just something reasonable. Unfortunately, we were running into the conflict with how the ordinance was written. That's pretty much it, unless you want more detail than that.
If we do, people can ask questions.
Okay?
Any questions for the applicant? I do. What's the HOA's limitation on your shed?
200 square feet.
Oh,
200 square feet or so. That's it.
they put you in the box.
Yeah, they put us in the box.
You can't say, well, we'll make one that's 207 square feet to get around our ordinance, because the HOA won't let you do it.
Well, and we could have asked for an exception
Yeah,
from them, but
sure.
it was getting bigger and getting more
Yeah.
expensive,
Our
We-
cutoff is 200, right?
Right.
So it would have to be exactly 200 to fit HOA and this kind of anomaly in our
I was trying to get
ordinance.
like, can a porch count? No, or,
Yeah.
a little covered area. It was,
Yeah, put a bump out of a couple square feet and you got it nailed.
yeah, so.
Yeah, that's,
Any other questions for
on
the,
behalf of the planning commission, I apologize that you even have to be here. That's a screw up is maybe too strong a word to go on record with, but certainly it is an anomaly if you want to use,
If we can help
Different
somebody
speech.
else out and they can pass on through, that's, it's fine.
as far as I know, you're the first and only ones that have had this issue. It's fairly recent that we've had appeals to the new zoning ordinance
Yeah,
for anything other than somebody doing something in a lake where it's already like a pre-existing nonconformity.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I apologize that you folks are kind of the guinea pigs for what we call the new ordinance that's been in place for 3 or so years by now.
yep. Any other questions for the applicant? Moving on to public hearing, is there anybody here in the public that would like to comment on this application? Hearing none. We're ready for ZBA deliberations. What do you all think?
Their lot was 0.98 acres.
Yeah, it's, I have no excuse for this. It's a ridiculous combination of circumstances that brings us here tonight. And I'm glad that apparently the township waived the appeals fee.
That's correct.
So that softens it a little bit, but I mean, just providing all that kind of documentation is a waste of somebody's time in a situation like this.
So the question is, in my mind, is as a person who really likes interpreting the ordinance and fixing problems by interpretation, I would be inclined to say, what? To that section of the ordinance that says if it's over an acre, you can only, and you have a 200 square foot shed, here's what you gotta do. Maybe that's too complex for what we're doing this evening. And instead, we should just say that there's a good reason for them to have a shed that is under 200 square feet, and that we think its height as measured by the township's method of measuring height can be as high as, and then if somebody would like to do the math, I'd be happy with it. It could be as high as 10 or 11 feet. I see, it does not have to be the full height of the shed. It just has to be half of the height of the roof.
So I was kind of working the math backwards on this. The drawing from the company
I got a better drawing for you.
shows that it's 1110 to the peak. It's 12 feet wide, a 12.6
I got
or
that too.
612 slope.
But then the company puts out a different set of specs.
Okay, does it show that it's 8 feet 10 to the eaves?
No, it doesn't say that. And I guess I could ask the applicant if you know how tall your sidewalls are, because this says that its sidewall height is just 6 feet 6.
You can buy different sidewall heights, it's an option. But yes, we could do sidewalls height of 6 foot.
What, have you haven't put in your,
Well, we weren't gonna order it.
it's smart enough, smart
Yeah,
enough.
good one.
But-
Go to HOA,
Okay.
so we're not done yet.
Oh, so they still have to say yes to
They
this?
don't say yes until you say yes.
I see.
So, we were hoping to have a shed months ago.
Okay, yeah.
Darn.
Okay, so if we figured this for a 6 foot 6 sidewall, would that be acceptable to you?
That's not going to be high enough according to the drawing that we were provided.
Well,
It looks
no,
like
I know
an 8
it's,
foot 10 sidewall.
I understand, and that's one of the problems we have with these drawings.
I'm sorry, I missed what you were proposing.
Well, show me your drawing that has a sidewall of 8 feet.
Well, I backed into it.
Okay,
This is-
yeah.
It's 1110 to the peak. It's a 612 slope, and it's a 12 feet wide structure, so half of that, we're gonna go 3 feet from there to there, because it's half of that width. So 3 feet minus, or 1110 minus the 3 I come up with approximately 8 feet 10 to the eaves. And by the township's way of measuring, it's going to be 8 feet 10 plus 1.5 feet. So
Which is.
wherever that leaves us, 10
Well,
foot 4,
what if
something
we
like
said-
that for the official.
What if we said it could be 11 feet tall? And,
I'm ordering the cupola, does that matter?
oh, you are?
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's provided for differently in the ordinance.
Yeah,
That's
I
separate.
don't think
In fact,
that
I
counts,
just-
but I
yeah,
could
it
find it
doesn't
here
count.
momentarily, I suspect.
I think it was in the old, I didn't know it was in the new.
No, the cupola can be 3 feet higher than
Oh, okay,
the roof
good.
line. If I understand it correctly.
Mr. Chair, one more thing, and maybe it's kind of what you were alluding to a few minutes ago. I really had a question for all of you lawyers on the ZBA. When we go through the decision criteria matrix, it seems like some of that just really doesn't fit. Is it possible for the ZBA, I've never been involved with this before, but perhaps you have, is it possible that the ZBA just has like a declaration of finding or something, that this is an apparent conflict in the ordinance, it was not intended to apply in this situation where somebody has over an acre, but they're restricted to, you know, whatever it was, 8 foot tall shed,
I think,
and we just conclude that this is something that needs to get fixed. We grant a variance, we remand the issue itself back to the planning commission to fix the overall conflict.
I guess
Because
I think.
'cause I think we run into some issues when we go through the decision
I-
criteria.
We may, I guess, everybody else just ought to throw their own thoughts in.
I feel like we can go through the decision criteria and modify when necessary.
Are not the criteria what is set
Yes,
forth?
microphone.
Oh, sorry.
I think the criteria are tied to findings we need to make under the, either under the ordinance or under state law. I think,
Or case law.
or case law. Yes, I think it's probably the elements that are required to grant a variance.
Just to be clear, I
I'm not
concur.
as sanguine. Let me just say, I have I couldn't have more sympathy than possible than I do with the applicants in this case. It's just, it's silly, it's unnecessary, I get all that. I'm less reluctant to exercise our power to deal with that problem.
What you're saying, if I understand you correctly, is that kick it back to the planning commission and make it.
My own feeling, and I'm not going to spend a lot of energy trying to
Yeah.
persuade others of
Yeah.
that, is that in order to grant a variance, the same elements apply to this, no matter how silly, in any other variance. The zoning ordinance says that there's a conflict between two sections in the zoning ordinance, the stricter section applies. All right? It's in this very zoning ordinance, under the definition of conflicts, it tells you how to resolve them. It says, you always pick the strictest one,
Yeah.
if two or more requirements apply. So, I think to grant a variance, you'd have to make the same findings that we normally make in other variants. That's all. And I would just say, in other circumstances, and I'm merely speaking for me, I'm not trying to be overly persuasive. You would say, when you get an application like this, you would say, well, you could build a shed that's 8.5 feet tall. It might not serve all your needs, but you could build a shed. It's not a problem.
I think where I first run afoul of the decision matrix, though, is the strict application of the terms of this ordinance constitute practical difficulty. All right, that seems logical to me. The next one, however, is practical difficulty is due to some physical condition peculiar to the property involved.
Yeah.
And it really is not, apart from the interpretation of the zoning ordinance.
Well,
It's
a
not
peculiar
unique
thing
to that
is-
property.
Well, it's unique to all properties in Dexter Township that happen to be over 1 acre.
Is it our-
Unique to all is kind of an oxymoron though, isn't it?
Well, there are a bunch of them that aren't.
No longer unique then if it applies to
Is
everybody.
it our job to just ignore an ordinance that we think is stupid? Okay, I guess that's where it comes down to. I don't see, our role is determined when we want to vary from, when we want to vary from the ordinance and the elements that are required to be in order to get the variance, all right? It's not our job to cure, I don't think, a stupid ordinance. Again, this is my philosophical issue. Because you all are going to have to go through this roll call, I think, and vote that they meet the elements. You're free to do that, and that's, you were all independent commissioners here. That's my 2 cents worth.
Mr. Chair, I understand and I think philosophically agree with most of what Mr. Mayor is stating. I think it would be an injustice for the township to require somebody to miss the building season because we have to fix the ordinance, or they order something that is not only not suitable for their needs, but puts them at a relative disadvantage compared to probably neighbors in other neighborhoods, neighbors unencumbered by HOA, neighbors that put something in prior to what we call the new zoning ordinance, and a disadvantage to people who say, well, what the devil, I don't need a permit for this, I'm just going to go plop one in.
I actually have a question for our stand-in, DPZ.
Sure.
If that's okay with the chair and the board for me to ask?
It's all right.
Okay, great. Out of curiosity, did
Yeah.
you look at the acreage of the properties, the other properties in that HOA?
I've got them pulled up right here.
That would be lovely.
Yeah, I can go, let's see, right across the street.
I think around the cul-de-sac, they're a little bit larger, but then once we go down the street, they
They
get
are,
smaller than an acre.
yeah. Right across the street is 1.4 acres. But right next door, let's see. If we go not on the cul-de-sac, on Redmond Hills Court on the straightaway. Just pulling up an example.
I'm sorry for not doing this earlier, but I couldn't get into the GIS data.
Yeah, I've just pulled another one at random that's 1.03
Okay.
acres. So it looks like in this development, sort of this southeastern corner of Redmond Hills Court, they're just a hair over an acre, a lot of them. And then it looks like the further west you go, they're a little bit smaller, maybe just under an acre, something like that. But
So that's it. How about to the south? Are there a significant number under an acre to the south? Once you get off of Redwood Court, it's the remainder of the HOA?
yeah, just picked one that comes in at 0.99.
Okay.
Which, I mean, just right, they're all,
Okay.
and I do, in my role at OHM, I do a lot of site plan reviews, often for subdivisions, and they're probably, I would guess all of these are gonna be plus or minus 5% of that lot size, so, yeah.
I'm sorry, were you
I'm
done
done.
with that?
Yeah.
So just working some math on this, and this seems ludicrous, but to avoid us altogether, I say all you need to do, and this admittedly sounds stupid, but you are 8 square feet shy of 200, correct? If you had exactly 200, you're okay with us, you're okay with the HOA. If you added that uniformly, you're scabbing something on to the back end of this thing, the 12-foot width, it's only 8 inches deep. Or you bump out the doors and add 8 square feet. This seems absolutely ridiculous, but if you find a way to add 8 square feet to the, prefab design, you don't need us, you comply with them. but
You technically
otherwise, I kind of gather that
But they
this might
can't go over,
become,
they can't go over 200 square feet.
no, they can go exactly 200.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
the ordinance is 200 square feet or less.
More or less.
And they get
So
pinged
if they
here.
go right to 200, they're
It still
Still
applies, yeah.
Crap.
And if they go over 200, then it's the HOA issue. yeah.
Well, how does the HOA measure square footage?
I just want to, I don't want to start, you have the floor.
No, I'm
You're
done. Go ahead.
I wanted to go back to this decision criteria. And if you look at 2906, decision criteria, we have to find that the following are true following a public hearing. And it lists practical difficulty, peculiar physical conditions, self-created, reasonable amount, health, safety, and welfare, adjacent properties, intent and purposes. That's what we have to find to grant a variance.
Yeah.
If I could bore people with this, the story will take a minute, I'm sorry, I'll be very, when I was advising personnel department in Arlington County, Virginia, when I was a lawyer there, I was explaining something to someone, and a classifier, and I was explaining something about a rule, it's just, but Peter, that's very unfair. It'll be very bad for the employee, and it's really unfair. And I said, I didn't go to fair school, I went to law school. So I guess that's really kind of what what you're facing here, just depends.
Okay, one other perhaps technicality. I see that the drawing is 12-foot width, but it has an overhang. Do you know or does it show in here what the depth of that overhang is?
I think they're both about a foot, on either
It
side.
appears that it might be somewhere between 6 inches and a foot, without trying to scale this drawing. And I don't think it says on there exactly.
3/8.
I mean, and building or roof overhangs are excluded from building coverage in the calculation.
You're not helping me out.
I know.
Yet at the Lakes properties, that counts as the setback,
Yeah,
which would also seem kind of,
I know. Yeah.
Lean to?
I'm surprised
it's-
that
I think
you're
that's still gonna be an
in the packet that I got.
accessory
We
building.
don't have the decision criteria. Oh, wait, here it is. If they didn't-
I was thinking of lean to for some firewood off the side of it.
Huh?
if you can get it by your HOA, I don't think that ought to be a particular problem for us. It gets you over the square feet.
A lot of people have those without asking, so I think that's.
Most people have sheds without asking.
Yes, and that's kind of a problem.
It's true.
Yeah, yep.
It has been mentioned often in the last few weeks.
So, you think you could actually add something to this?
That we would count that the HOA
Yeah,
would
but
not
I don't
count.
know that the zoning, you know, is gonna consider that square footage. You just, even if it's got a roof that's attached to the backside of it, is that gonna be considered square footage? Is your front porch part of your square footage, because it's covered, it's not closed.
You'd be surprised, a pergola is counted, correct?
I think if it's, how did that go? And maybe it's addressed differently here.
Yeah.
Something that's impervious counted in the square feet, but otherwise not. So if your roof, whatever is going to catch rain, added to this, or whatever caught rain added to the square feet. So like the difference between concrete patio and pavers. Yeah, it just seems to me that what we have here is, we have unfortunately stumbled upon something that seems to be inconsistent in the ordinance. and I can speak for, I came in at the tail end of the ordinance and was told that we've been at work on this for, Janice maybe remembers, I keep forgetting whether they said 7 years, 11 years, a long darn time.
7.
Even at my age, a significant portion of my lifetime, somebody spent doing this, and we came to the meeting, it was one of my first few planning commission meetings, and they said, this is all set to go, and unfortunately, I guess, I read through the thing, and we spent 3 hours with corrections in that meeting and held it over to another 3-hour meeting, and that was just for typos and obvious inconsistencies. There are still more in there. And I think unfortunately, we stumbled upon one that first people that made an application in this set of circumstances, the thing kind of goes tilt. And I don't think it should. I don't know what the mechanism is for curing that tonight. I understand what Peter is saying. But it just seems like, hey, this is little old Dexter Township trying to serve its citizens, and this does not.
So just to clarify on the building coverage issue, because it does say, in the definitions under B, definitions of words or phrases starting with B, it does say building coverage, the horizontal area of a lot, stated as a percentage of the lot area that is covered by all buildings located on the lot. This includes all buildings, roofed porches, arbors, breezeways, patio roofs, whether open box type or lath roofs or fully roofed, but does not include fences, walls, or hedges used as fences on roof decks or patios or swimming pools. Building coverage shall be measured from the exterior facades, including roofed porches, patios, breezeways. Building coverage shall exclude the roof overhang. But
Say that part again, please.
building,
Overhang what?
building coverage shall exclude the roof overhang.
Yes.
But that's within limit, correct?
I was just going to ask that. You couldn't have a 10-foot building with a 20-foot overhang and not have that add up, right? I say right, like
I
that
know.
should be so, and we probably don't address it at all.
Overhang, section O, definition of words and phrases starting with O. Overhang, the portion of the roof that extends beyond the exterior wall or covered porch, deck, or patio.
If a squirrel could live in the cupola, could you count that as square footage?
I know, could they put up a weather vane? No. Shall exclude the roof overhang. It's gotta be on there. Projections, section 16. Horizontal
You know, at the next
projections.
planning commission, they ought to draft an ordinance just repealing that section, that 8.5-foot section ought to just be repealed.
Yeah.
Because
I don't-
it makes no
I don't know.
sense.
Well,
Peter, what section of the ordinance are you referring to where it says that the more rigid rules will apply?
That's under conflicting laws, 1.05.
Marty, section 16.35, permitted projections, A, horizontal projections, roof overhangs are limited to 3 feet.
Excellent, thank you.
And then low unroofed porches, decks, patios, and steps limited to 5 feet. That's in the front yard, it's different per front yard, side yard, rear yard.
Peter, you're absolutely right. It does say that. Well, board?
Kathy, I feel like it's been quiet.
Yeah, Kathy, I think, has an idea of what to do here.
I'm hoping.
Can we not just vote on it?
Yeah, just move forward and vote on it.
Call the question.
Yeah, we can do that. I think Kathy's idea is a good one.
That would be fair to them. I mean,
Let's start working our way
But by
through.
voting on it, it's not a vote, hey, should we do this or not? It's we have to go through the
We're gonna
decision
go through the
criteria.
decision criteria and see how we all feel about the decision criteria. So,
And, excuse me, one more thing. Could you kind of explain the rules to us, please, about what is required as we go through the decision criteria? It needs to be majority affirmative for each criteria?
that's right. If any of the criteria get a majority no vote, then the proposed variance can't be granted.
Don't want to commingle and stuff there. Okay.
Yeah, your stuff.
And in your materials, you're not required to follow the decisions that have been suggested in the materials. Well, what I'm saying is she filled out all of the answers,
Well,
right?
yes.
Okay, and we're not required to follow that. Okay, that's all I was saying.
I do have one question, if I
Certainly.
might ask before we vote, if that's okay. In dividing the intent,
What page is the?
should we go back and refer to the definition of intent before we go ahead and define that?
Okay, are you gonna help us with the intent?
Well, I'm hoping to find it.
Which intent are you looking for?
The intent of the ordinance.
Of 1611?
Okay.
Thank you.
I think if it's for accessory buildings, the intent is 16.1. In the digital PDF, it's on page 115, so it's probably right about halfway through.
Okay, so the intent of the ordinance relevant to the general provisions.
Yep,
Article 16, Section 1601, Purpose and Intent. The intent and purpose of this article is to A, establish supplemental standards that apply to all uses, properties, structures, and zoning districts. B, prevent overcrowding of land and to ensure adequate space for permitted uses. C, ensure structures and properties are safe. And D, preserve and promote the public health, safety, and welfare. So I think with
Worthwhile
that in
reading.
mind, we can proceed.
okay.
Can I ask one question, maybe just kind of get people's thoughts on it? Would it be a legitimate interpretation of question 2, the practical difficulty is due to some physical condition peculiar to the property involved, that the physical condition is that it happens to be a lot above 2 acres in Dexter Township, and this is the first run through the, the first time that we noticed that there was a problem. Is that a stretch? Is that an unreasonable stretch?
I guess we each have to answer that question for ourselves. And it's over 1 acre, it's not over 2 acres, so.
Yeah, did I say 2?
Yeah, you did
Yeah,
say
sorry.
2, but it's
Yeah,
just
over
over
1. The peculiarity is that
Yep,
it is on this side of the ordinance rather than on
Right.
that side of.
right. All right, so everybody ready to go through the decision criteria now? All right, our first decision is practical difficulty 29.06C1. The strict application of the terms of this ordinance would constitute a practical difficulty. Kathy?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
Marty?
Yes.
Peter?
No.
The chair votes yes as well. I can't think of anything that's more of a practical difficulty than slamming somebody with a 1 acre lot with an 8.5 foot limitation on the size of their maximum accessory height. 2, physical condition, 2906C2. The practical difficulty is due to some physical condition peculiar to the property involved. Kathy?
No? No? I'm having a hard time with the interpretation of that.
Okay, so your vote is no. Now, understand, this is a filled-out answer that you're not
I know.
not required to accept.
And that,
Right, no, I see.
I apologize on Adriana's behalf. I don't know that she knew the norms or the culture. She was not trying to sway you folks. These were just her findings as a planner.
I don't think, yeah.
Okay, no.
No.
Okay, Beth?
No.
Marty?
Yes. To summarize, the reason I stated a couple of minutes ago is, yeah, the physical condition that's peculiar to this property is that it is slightly over 1 acre and therefore falls into this area of the zoning ordinance.
Peter?
No.
And the chair joins Marty in his analysis and votes yes. We can continue with the process. 3, self-created, 29063. The practical difficulty is not self-created. Kathy?
Yes, it is not self-created.
Beth?
Yes.
Marty?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes as well. 4, reasonable amount necessary, 2906C4. The variance is a reasonable amount necessary to mitigate the practical difficulty.
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Marty?
Yes.
Peter? We don't know
No.
what it is, but,
No.
and the chair votes yes. 5, public health, safety, and welfare, 2906C5. Approval of the variance will not be injurious to public health, safety, and welfare.
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
Marty?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Chair votes yes as well. 6, adjacent properties, 2906C6. Approval of the variance will not affect the use of adjacent properties or the area in a substantially adverse manner. Kathy?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
Yes.
And Peter?
Yes.
Chair votes yes as well. And finally, 7, intent of the ordinance, 2906C7. Approval of the variance is consistent with the intent and purpose of this ordinance. Kathy?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
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 And the chair votes yes as well. Regrettably, we didn't get a majority of yes vote on
I thought we got 3.
no, we only got 2 yes votes on number
gotcha.
2.
And number 2.
Would the chair entertain further discussion on that, or is is
Some
the
arm
vote
twisting
final?
or anything?
Yeah. Well, I think there was some room for discussion and maybe some other thoughts when we went through that. Would that be worth a couple minutes of open discussion? And-
We certainly can discuss this further. We've got our votes on the decision criteria.
Mr. Chair, can I make a parliamentary inquiry if I may for a second?
Of course.
A person in the majority can move to reconsider, right?
Yes.
Parliamentary, all right. For purposes of facilitating a discussion, I am happy to move reconsideration of the criteria that got 3 no votes.
Thank you, Peter.
Excellent parliamentary procedure.
Nice.
Okay, so now we're having our reconsideration. I don't have anything really earth-shattering to add to this, other than the analysis, Marty, that you made, which is, yes, there are quite a number of properties in Dexter Township that are just slightly over 1 acre, who have now been negatively impacted by the language of this ordinance that I'm confident nobody intended. So I'm comfortable saying that the practical difficulty is due to the fact that this is a 1.02 acre lot as opposed to a 0.99 acre lot.
I have an idea. If I might so entertain the remaining members of the board, including myself.
You gonna tell us stories, or?
No, I'm gonna leave it at this. There is a practical difficulty as I reconsider my initial no. There is a practical difficulty here in that they are also subjected to HOA bylaws that prevent them from going above 200 square feet.
Ooh, that's a clever thought.
And so being subjected to those bylaws, they can't, they are completely unable to do what the ordinance requires for them to do, to go above the 200 and to satisfy the conditions. And the ordinance may change, but the deed restrictions, which one trumps? Does anybody know the answer to that? So in my mind, I can change my no vote to a yes based on the fact that their HOA bylaws are unique to this situation and prevent them from going beyond 200 square feet.
Which they otherwise would do in a heartbeat.
Otherwise would do if the HOA, I mean, who doesn't want a bigger shed?
By 8 square feet.
By 8 square feet. Does that sound reasonable?
If it sounds reasonable to yourself and you're willing to change your vote based on that, then that's what you should do.
I think on further examination of this question, I think I have to change my vote to a yes as well.
Okay.
Okay, shall we go through again with another voice vote on criteria 2, physical condition, and get everybody's current vote on that topic? 2906C2, the practical difficulty is due to some physical condition peculiar to the property involved. And Kathy, what's your vote at this time?
Yes.
Beth, your vote at this time?
Yes, provided that a deed restriction or a HOA bylaw would qualify as a physical condition peculiar to the property involved.
So are you limiting your yes vote, or are you making your yes vote based on the fact that there is such a condition?
From B, option B.
Okay, all right. Marty
Yes.
and Peter, did this sway you?
Believe it or not, that would be a no.
And the chair votes yes as well. And so now the good news is that all of the criteria have received an affirmative vote, and I would entertain a motion by our motion mistress.
Okay. Let me just turn to the right page. I would like to make a motion to approve the variance petition number 23 ZBA-004 for the property located at 13270 Redmond Hills Court tax ID D0419-110-025. The applicants, John and Catherine Bueller, for a, for a, how do I want to say?
Well, I think what we wanted, you know, really never talk about exactly how to.
Yeah, for a,
Why don't we say a shed height of 11 feet?
well, what was noticed?
Between 8.5 and 11.5.
Okay. For the requested variance of 11 feet, as opposed to the required, for the requested height of 11 feet as opposed to the required height of 8 feet 6 inches in ordinance section 1611 F3. We did not say anything about nonconformities.
No, there aren't any. Noted anyway. Do we have a second for that motion?
Support.
Okay.
All right, let's vote on it. Kathy,
Aye. Yes.
Beth,
Yes.
Marty,
Yes.
Peter,
No.
and the chair votes yes as well. Congratulations, after a long and arduous voting process, your request for a variance has been approved. You've got a year to get things done on this. Be sure to, I don't know, who do they see now to get their paperwork to move this thing forward? Do
Yeah.
they see you? Do they see?
We've already got, we have your original application. We still have your check as well. We have more than enough documentation about what this shed's going to look like from every angle. So from the DPZ position, we've got everything we need to approve this permit and move forward.
So they don't have to come in and sign any permits or anything at all to get going on your shed?
I just have to issue a
You
major
just issue
zoning
it
permit,
and
yeah.
You'll
Yep.
do it and
Yeah.
they'll get it and that'll be that.
As my understanding, correct me if I'm
Okay.
wrong, Beth.
It is also supposed to be recorded, correct?
Oh, the variance is
Yes.
supposed to be recorded.
This is
And
correct.
Okay.
you're on top of that as well?
I am.
Okay,
I will
good.
be. It's the first one that's come across my desk, but I'll figure out how to do it.
Okay, very good. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Anything else with respect to this variance request? Congratulations. I hope we were entertaining for you.
It was an experience.
Tell our friends. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
And this is why people do not get permits.
This just like for forgiveness.
Exactly.
Yep.
You can always follow the
Yep.
rules. Let's
Good luck.
work.
Sorry for the hassle.
All right, now we're here for public comment on non-agenda items. It doesn't look like there is any. Concerns from the ZBA members, the Director of Planning and Zoning, and the Recording Secretary. Janice, tell us of your concerns. Did we speak loudly enough?
I don't know until I hear the recording later, but I know Beth was sitting 5 feet away from the microphone.
You just called me.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
And Peter speaks loud enough that if he's 5 feet away, it'll pick it up. It's Beth.
Sorry.
okay. Any other concerns?
No, you did a fine job tonight.
Okay, well, with being out of practice for 5 months, I think we were lucky to get through it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, any other concerns by ZBA members?
I'll put my concern on the record if that's okay.
I'd love it.
So my bigger concern out of all the concerns I had this evening was that we do need to make sure that we communicate to the applicants that they need to be here so that we can properly discuss with them what their situation is and get a better understanding. I'd hate for a situation to come through where maybe we misunderstood the applicant or the applicant felt that they didn't get their point across after we made our decision. I believe we have contemplated in the past kicking the meeting forward for non-showing applicants. So I think that's the big thing. Now I know that ultimately you're not may not be the person.
I'm not the guy, but it seems like Adriana and I have a big opportunity to document
Yeah.
and to propose things that get changed and passed along. So,
Yeah.
So that's awesome, so thank you. And then the other one, Adriana so kindly took the time to fill in the decision criteria, but our general culture is not to do that because we want to be able to come to a decision on our own without looking like we've been swayed by any particular party. Sure. And then finally, I'm going to raise the issue. In our last meeting, I believe it was, we talked about the reasonable minimum amount and what that potentially could mean, and we came to an understanding in our last meeting. I would like to make sure that that gets put to the top of the list, as it will impact every single decision we make between now and until it gets changed or straightened out. And while we've come up with, I think, a rather workable definition for the ZBA, I think that something more clearly defined and voted upon by the Board of Trustees would be a good service to the citizens that live in this township, or the residents of the township, I should say. So those are my three biggies.
Okay. Any other concerns for the DPZ?
Kathy, do you have something? I just have one, but I thought you were about to say something.
I think that was painful. I had 4 variances when I came in, and it didn't take this long, and it all went through, but I think this needs to be addressed, this issue in here.
Yeah, it
So-
definitely needs to be addressed.
However, our decision matrix says a reasonable amount, not a minimum
Still
amount.
does.
So that may have gotten picked up from,
Well, from all of our
Something from
previous,
months ago.
of all of our previous decision matrices.
Right.
well,
They
the
never had
last
to-
one I
they never had-
thought did say,
Did it?
Really?
I thought, because isn't that how it came up, the last one or the one before?
I don't
Oh, the minimum.
think so. I think that a good point
Maybe
here
that was
for the
just pointed out
Yeah, for the
separately.
DPZ is in the decision matrix. The ZBA has decided that where is it? Oh, that under item 4 here, it should say the reasonable minimum amount necessary presently, because we decided to interpret the ordinance to mean that.
Yeah.
And at least I, for one, am not happy with that, but I believe that's what we agreed to. And so until the Board of Trustees takes action on it, that's what our decision criteria ought to say.
Whatever the ordinance language is finally proposed, the lawyers definitely need to look at that, because I want to make sure whatever our criteria are aligns with whatever the state law requirements are. We don't want to be deviating from whatever.
I think that's fine.
And it seems to me if that's where that came from.
Usually it sounds like
language.
language
It was a while ago.
It sounds like language that would be in nature of legislation, but who knows?
So.
My overall comment was not so much a concern, but kind of following up what Kathy just mentioned. Yeah, that was a real painful process, but I think had we left here with something other than approval for them to put up their little shed, I think most of us would have felt bad. We did not accomplish
All of
it.
us would have felt bad just because
All of us would have felt that
bad.
justice was not accomplished
Yeah.
tonight.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
it just, I get it that it's very dissatisfying. There will probably be other things that we will stumble upon. I think the supervisor made it clear that there will be a more proactive approach to reviewing this, so we don't have to rely on stumbling upon issues, anomalies, errors, whatever.
And the other thing I would observe, when you mentioned that you were told that the zoning ordinance had been worked on for 7 years, the one that got adopted was not worked on for 7 years. There was another one that was worked on hard and long.
Really?
And the Board of Trustees said, oh, we don't like that. Let's try again.
And that's the point where the board took it upon, they kind
Itself,
of brought it
in
in.
and then hired a consultant
Yeah.
and had the consultant
That was
write
the
it.
final product.
And that was the final product. I can tell you that the,
OHM was not the
I didn't
No.
even know that one way or the other, but I can tell you that the people who worked on the prior versions would not have let this kind of
I'll be
a
darned.
thing take place. But, you know, that was under Zach Michelle's tutelage, and he put a lot of detailed thought into stuff. And it wasn't as well received as it could have been. But it wasn't something,
A note, Zach Michelle's was an urban planner, not a rural planner.
right. That's,
That's why so many details were put in there.
yeah. In any event. Any other comments, concerns, things that we need to deal with? Anybody want to go out in the rain? All right. Then we've reached the end of the agenda, and we're adjourned.
Do you know if are we going to have a meeting next month? Is there any applicants pending?
So what's waiting?
Oh, no.
What,
Oh, no.
what kind of